Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MBOM podcast. My name is Amanda and I'll be your host for this and all episodes of the show. This episode of the podcast is brought to you in part by BeYogi. BeYogi is an online resource dedicated to providing yoga teachers and students with the inspiration and information and insurance they will need during every step of their yoga journey. BeYogi has drawn from their knowledge of the yoga world to not only create incredible content, but to also provide yoga and wellness professionals with the insurance coverage they will need to expand their careers. And I don't know about you, but I know that I run into a lot of places that won't let me teach or offer anything if I don't have insurance. So this is definitely something that if you don't have, you'll want to get. And they have an incredible things like online teaching coverage. So no matter what style you're teaching or wherever you are in the world, give yourself a little peace of mind knowing that you are covered should something happen. Head on over to beyogi.com/MBOM, so MBOM, to learn more or to get coverage today. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Fave Yogis. The Fave Yogis app is back with new features for teachers. You guys might remember from a few months ago, I had the CEO of Fave Yogis on the podcast. He told me all about his yoga journey in combining yoga with tech, which I think is so unique and so cool. As well, they sponsored the podcast for a number of months, and I love the partnership that I have with Fave Yogis because they really are an app that's designed for you and for me and for all of us yoga teachers out there. Now they're back with even more features that allow you to create and manage your own private classes. You can make payment and registration a breeze. Do you have regular private clients? Make life easier with autopay. Forget about remembering to Venmo, or if you're Canadian, you can't even do that. We've got to use cash, PayPal, or direct e-transfer. Sure, it's not that difficult, but the use of autopay to enable repeat payments is so much easier. You can also keep your calendars in sync with classes. Google Calendar integration automatically updates both teacher and student classes when you make changes from your Fave Yogis app. It's still just your yoga. Teachers add classes, students add teachers, teachers and students stay connected. Head on over to faveyogis.com to get your Fave Yogis app or to the App Store on your device and download Fave Yogis. It's FAVYOGIS. Make sure you use code MBOM, and let them know that I sent you. All right, on to today's episode of the podcast. I am super excited to be joined by Kristen Williams. I actually got connected to Kristen from Britta. And if you guys remember, a couple of months back, probably close to a year ago, I had Britta on the podcast. She's the founder of Xanadu Yoga, and she is an incredible traveling yogi, just making big waves all over the world. And Britta knows Kristen from traveling, and as a fellow traveler, I love the connections that you get to make all over the world through your traveling friends. So when Britta reached out to me and said, hey, I know a badass yogi that you have to have on the podcast, I was like, yes, send her my way. And so Kristen is the founder of K10 Yoga Coop. She's also the founder of the Winston Salem Yoga Festival, which is coming up really quick here in May. She is also the founder of Yoga Evolving Now. She's traveled the world and is passionate about bringing community together through yoga. And so on this episode of the podcast, we talk about her journey, combining travel with yoga, what it's like to be a traveling yoga teacher. And you might be really interested to hear her answer because it was a little bit different than what I expected and quite different from the conversation that I had with Britta. So I always just think it's really cool to hear how different people are combining their different passions to create their businesses and to be successful with them. And Kristen and I talk about that. We talk about the business lessons she's learned through her career, what it's like to start a yoga festival from scratch, what it's like to run a co-op yoga studio, and so much more. So I hope that you guys really enjoy this episode of the podcast. And here's Kristen. Welcome to the podcast today, Kristen. I'm super excited to have you here with me today.
Thank you.
And where are you joining me from today?
So I am currently in Phoenix, Arizona, but I live most of the time in Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Awesome. That's very cool. I'm somebody who has a couple of homes as well. So I always like hearing about other people's experiences with that. Do you just spend winters in Arizona, or how do you sort of balance between the two?
So my all of my yoga stuff is based in North Carolina, and then my boyfriend lives in Arizona. So I do 2 weeks in Arizona and 2 weeks in North Carolina, and it works. It's like a little bit quirky, but I work really hard for the 2 weeks that I'm in North Carolina. And then in Arizona, it's like I have time to settle, to like plan, to get organized again, and just figure out how the next 2 weeks will look based on who is in different training programs and different things like that. So I'm a Capricorn, so I know if I didn't give myself the time to step back, I would just book my schedule every single day. So it's actually a really great balance for me.
Nice. Awesome. I love that. And so I want to dive into your business, the yoga festival, all the good stuff you have going on. But can we back up a little bit and talk about how you first got into yoga? Can you tell me your yoga story?
Yeah, so I started in just as a practice in 2008 because I was training for a half marathon. I feel like I have heard that from a number of people recently that they just got into it because they were doing some kind of training and needed to stretch. And that's exactly what the entry point was for me. At the time, I lived in Carteret County, North Carolina, which yoga was like voodoo. So we had a gym that offered yoga stretching classes. So I fell into those, realized that I could actually touch my toes, which unbeknownst to me, since my PE classes in high school taught me differently. So fell into just stretching, and then actually found a studio in Morehead City, fell into classes there, and just absolutely loved like all of just like the ooey gooiness of a yoga class. And I felt very supported within my yoga practice there, and began to realize that my life looked a certain way, but that was not exactly how I wanted to live my life. And where on the outside it looked like this really picture perfect kind of picket fence lifestyle, that I needed to make some hard decisions and I needed to make some changes. And I did not know how to do any of that or even where to start. And so yoga became this place that just held me for an hour. I remember every Tuesday at 6:00, I would go, and it was just like my hour to make some decisions, to find some courage, to listen to my own inner wisdom, to know that I was supported, if by nothing else, then by the breath and by the earth. And that was what I needed. So I made some hard decisions, broke some hearts, and took my golden retriever and just carried on with my life. And as it would become, that studio had a yoga teacher training that showed up. And so the lady who teaches that training, her husband was a part of the Marine Corps band. And so she traveled around doing teacher trainings wherever he was stationed. So it was a bit of a lark just how that happened. It wasn't like the studio decided that they were going to really create this big school. It just fell into our laps, basically. So I did my 200-hour teacher training, and at the time I worked at a resort in Atlantic Beach, North Carolina. So I decided that I would teach just 30-minute yoga classes. And the first people that showed up, one was a wheelchair user, one was like well into their 60s, early 70s, a 14-year-old, and then like a couple people scattered in between. And I thought, I have no idea what I'm doing. So I really stepped up my game as far as paying more attention in my teacher training and realizing that I still had a whole lot to learn. So I finished up 200-hour and then was offered a scholarship to be able to go to New York to train with the Off the Mat Into the World group and do their yoga in action program as part of a 300-hour teacher training. So I continued with my same teacher, did my 200 and my 300-hour with her, was able to really dive in a lot with Off the Mat Into the World and just learn how I could be of service based on the experiences that I had previously. So long story short, I finished up both of those trainings. I quit my full-time job. I sold the house, did all the stuff, and I hauled off to Fiji for 3 months, because if you're going to quit your job and you're going to do all that, you might as well go for as long as you can. So I did 3 months in Fiji, and the plan was to do a yoga retreat. And so I made some connections. This was now in 2011. And so I had made some connections through Facebook, but this was really before we had Instagram, or Facebook didn't even look the way that it does now. And it was interesting because I met this lady and she said, if I can come to your retreat for free, then you can stay at my house for the 3 months. So, okay, I stayed with her for 3 months in Fiji, and it was just a absolutely wonderful experience. And then the weekend of the retreat came up, and it rained 9 meters of water. So if y'all are meter people, that's 27 feet. 2 low pressures ran into each other, and the weekend retreat was now just really like a rescue mission. So the airports were shut down, the bus stations were shut down, the buses weren't running, the streets were washed out. There was going to be no yoga retreat. So that's, for me, is when the real yoga started, because I was now faced with this question of whether I was going to keep moving forward and leaning into this work that had supported me personally for so long, or if I just wanted to return back to the States and just get another job doing something random that didn't serve my purpose or really the world in very much of any kind of way. So that took a lot of tears and a lot of time on my yoga mat to figure that stuff out. And I clearly decided to keep leaning into this work, and knew that there was a greater calling for that. However, I do still feel slightly traumatized by yoga retreats. But I kept moving forward. I landed back in North Carolina after just a little bit more time traveling, and I got a job at the YWCA and just taught random classes there just to get by and figure it out. And eventually I thought, there's so much to this work. There's so much in this town that isn't being utilized with this work. So what can I do to be of service to my community, to really offer the benefits of this practice outside of what is becoming Facebook and Instagram is showing us that yoga looks like. So it was an interesting road to get me there. And I guess it was 2014, I wrote the curriculum for my yoga school. And then 2015 is when I really started to put that into action. So we're going on 4 years with a 200-hour school. We also have a 300-hour school, and it's all service oriented, with encouragement for people to go and travel, or encouragement for people to kind of step out of their comfort zones, to know that they can do hard things, to know that it'll be messy and clunky, but it's so amazing and liberating on the other side of it. So it's really an interesting story when I just pause and say it again.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And there's so much incredible stuff in there. I feel like where do I want to start? I feel like thinking about your experience teaching, where you have all these different types of people coming to your class. I feel like that's such a scary position to be in, especially as a new yoga teacher, but also something that kind of, I think, opens your eyes to the fact that it's not just bendy, skinny women who need yoga or who are interested in yoga. And I feel like that's something that can really shape your teaching in a positive way. So I think it's really interesting that you had that experience early on. And then, with your retreat, I definitely understand being scarred. Just thinking about that, I'm like, oh God, I don't think I'd ever run another retreat.
Right?
Have you dove back into retreats, or are you still I'm not quite sure if we're ready for that?
I've played around with the idea, and people ask me all the time, because they're like, you travel all over the place. Why don't you just do retreats when you're there? And I'm like, well, let me just tell you, do you want 9 meters of water? But I tried to do one, or I toyed around with the idea of doing one in Costa Rica a couple of years ago, but I think my heart just isn't in it. I think I'm still just dealing with my own trauma around that. And so I didn't really promote it very much. I didn't put a whole lot into it. There's still a little bit of a fear factor for me of like what could go wrong. And, coming right out of the gate as a new yoga teacher and having that experience and figuring out like refunds like that, I did not put in my liability form that acts of God would require like for me to keep any amount of money. So I was faced with giving full refunds to all the people who had showed up for this retreat. And so there's just, the little factors in the background that like we like glorify retreats to look like this one thing, but the business side of it, there's like so much that needs to be thought through. And, there's some companies that have approached me to be like, will you teach a retreat for us? And I don't know. I think I'm just at this point in my life where like I really love to travel and I really love to teach yoga, and travel is kind of my muse when I'm not teaching yoga. So I don't know if I so much want to mix them all the time. So it's a different perspective, but I can see how it could be confusing. Why not just do more retreats?
Yeah. I definitely understand as somebody who like loves to travel as well. Like I think that, I guess even from the perspective of like I've been working and traveling for the last couple of years, and working while traveling definitely takes some of my love of travel away, because it's like
exactly,
it's just like not the same. Like I remember traveling for the first time and feeling this sense of like freedom and like no responsibility, and that was something that was just like very, very like empowering and just like freeing. Like I was like, man, I could be like this person I've never been before. And like, I definitely don't get that when like I have to be on calls and, people are like, hello, have you checked your email in the last 5 minutes?
No, I'm searching for a coffee shop with proper internet right now.
Yeah, pretty much. Just give me a second.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's hard, like in the culture, like especially American culture of like, we want everybody to respond to emails like right away and to like be on point, and everything is so instantaneous. And in traveling, it's so, when do I find a coffee shop that has internet? And so, to mix those two worlds, it's a little difficult, but it's brilliant when you can make it happen. But for me, based on my little scars there, I think I'll just take traveling, and then I'll take yoga, and I'll teach people how to travel and be a yoga teacher, or, work with other resources to do that. But I don't know if that's so much for me right now, I'll say.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that. And I think it's like a good reminder that, we can love something, but we don't necessarily need to make it an aspect of your business. Like just because you don't want to run retreats doesn't mean like you're any less of a traveler or like anything like that. So I think that's a good reminder too, is like if our heart's not in it, maybe it's just like separating the things that we love and not necessarily making it an aspect of our business.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you created your yoga school almost 4 years ago, did you build your yoga co-op at the same time, or when did that come into things?
I did not. So the co-op came into play, it's been about almost 2 years ago now. It'll be 2 years this summer. And so initially with the school, what I should say is that I never wanted a brick and mortar. So when I saw brick and mortar, all I saw was busy dealing with all the stuff. And so I wanted to get creative and kind of reimagine what it would be like to have a yoga school that supports all of the yoga studios that are in town. So I thought if I could just be K10 Yoga, then I can work with the studios in town and offer maybe discounts on classes, discounts on workshops, whatever, and really start to get students to experience all the classes that are available to them. So I would rent space from one studio for a while. I did it at the Y, and just have home base for teacher training. But then our students are encouraged to take, or they're required to take 50 yoga classes. So I set it up with the studios around town to offer discounts for teacher trainees so that they could go around, learn from all the different teachers in town, and really start to develop into the authentic teacher that they wanted to be. I always joke, but I mean it, that it feels narcissistic to have like little Kristens running around that teach just like me. So I would prefer for people to find their own voice, to find the style of yoga that they really love, the cues that they really love, the things that they really don't love. And then they know. So now they can start to develop into this like really amazing and authentic teacher that isn't trying to act like somebody else. So therefore it becomes a super sustainable thing. I don't know if anybody out there can relate to when you have to like sub a class and you try to teach just like the teacher whose class you're subbing, and it ends up being like the worst class you've ever taught.
It's like such a hot mess trying to be somebody else.
So, I experienced that, and I thought, well, gosh, like through teacher training, what if we just set it up from the beginning to where like we're supporting all the studios in town and we're creating opportunities for students to really learn and figure out who and what they want to be. So it was, I guess, a couple of years later that the opportunity was presented to be able to open this co-op space. So it's actually a photography studio. So I still rent space from them, but we set the model up in such a way that as people are graduating from teacher training, if they want to teach a class, then they can rent the space. So it's $20 to rent the space. We don't charge more than $10 for classes. And whatever the teachers make is theirs to keep. So there's really no overhead. I do like one social media post a week about what classes are coming up at the co-op, but then all the teachers, they commit to a 3-month period of time. And during that 3 months, they get access to Facebook, Instagram, all the social media stuff that they need. And it's really part of their job to promote their own classes, to like boost themselves, to create a name for themselves. So again, looking from a sustainability aspect, they're building their name as opposed to like a studio's name, which is something I found was kind of clunky coming out of teacher training, is that it's like, oh, okay, well, you are a teacher for blah, 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 blah studio. Well, yeah, but I'm also Kristen Williams. So how can we, again, create those conditions for our students to really be able to create a name for themselves? And it's less work for me to kind of have a studio and be able to offer classes at a more discounted rate than any of the other studios in town as well. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I've heard of the concept of a co-op before, but I've never actually chatted with somebody who runs one. Do you guys run into ever any issues with like not having enough teachers to teach, or has it been pretty smooth in terms of like filling those class times?
It's been pretty smooth. The barrier that we run into is that it's a co-op space in terms of yoga, but it's also a co-op space in terms of we're working with a photography studio. There's also a lady who does massage there, and it's a single sink salon. So it's a really there's a lot of moving parts. So what we find as more of a barrier is not having enough time for the demand that we could have for teachers. So right now we have classes Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, and then we do teacher trainings one Wednesday night a month and on the weekends once a month. And then kind of the other time is reserved for if the photography studio wants to do workshops or needs to do anything. Like, it's just a really interesting co-working space. But no, we certainly don't have any trouble getting teachers or anything. It's more just finding all the time slots that could be available. But just this year, I will say we got creative in 2019, and we have an online studio. So the way we're working it now is that you can come to live classes, like in-person classes, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, but then to continue your practice throughout the rest of the week, then you can join us for a class in the online studio. So kind of bridging two worlds there.
Yeah, that's really cool. Hey yogis, I just wanted to take a quick little break to talk about studio growth. Has your yoga studio's growth become stagnant? If you're like many studio owners I talk to, you've tried every marketing tactic under the sun. You started a blog, you're posting regularly on all the social media sites, running challenges, sending out newsletters, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, you're doing a ton of work and barely paying the bills. What if there was an easier way? A way to get new students regularly coming through the door without having to do so much work to get them there. A proven system that will consistently bring in 20 plus new paying students to your studio each and every month. Well, there is. Ron Medlin and his team at GetYogaStudents.com have developed a 3-step system that will help you quickly grow your yoga studio to a 6-figure profits and beyond without being shackled to your business. So if you're ready to grow fast and you'd like the blueprint to help you get started, visit GetYogaStudents.com today to get the exact system Ron and his team uses to help his yoga studio clients add 10, 20, or even 30 new students every single month. On top of that, you get a free 45-minute consultation session. So if you're kind of like, I'm not really too sure about all this, I don't want to fork out a bunch of money without even knowing if this is going to work, head on over to GetYogaStudents.com, book a free consultation, and just talk with Ron. He's got so much knowledge, and him and his team are willing to work with you with your studio's needs. And once again, it's GetYogaStudents.com to start getting more students in your yoga studio. All right, back to the episode. And then so like somebody, so it's the photography studio, like that's the person who has the space, and then they just rent it out to you guys. You guys have the time slot, and then you fill it with the teachers based off the 3-month commitment. That's how it works?
That's how it works.
Nice. That's awesome. And what's been sort of the response like from the teacher side? Like, do they like this opportunity? Like, what are they sort of saying?
They do once they get used to it. You know, there's always that first fear of like, what do you mean I have to pay $20 to rent this space? What if nobody comes? And I'm like, well, okay, so welcome to the hustle.
Welcome to like what every studio owner deals with.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, here are all of the resources. So, you know, do what you've got to do. And, you know, even it being my thing, even there have been times where I have one student that shows up and that's fine. But at the end of the day, what is happening is that we are creating a different culture in our yoga community to drop the prices. And so most of the time the teachers appreciate that and they understand that it'll all come out in the wash. And if they commit to 3 months and the first 2 weeks they don't have anybody that shows up, that second month they might be packing it out with like 15 or 18 people in their class. So now you're making a really good amount of money considering how much you're paying into it. So it's a different model. Teachers in Winston are not used to that model. You know, it's always been you just work for a studio or you work for a gym or you work for the Y and you just get paid your little paycheck and then you're done with it. But this really requires like some extra effort. But, you know, at the end of the day, our community is truly benefiting. I feel like the teachers are growing. I feel like the community is growing. There's more access to wellness and to yoga. And you know, that's what was important to me is yoga held me through so many things in my life. And we're creating disconnect by having classes so expensive that people can't experience that. So again, like what kind of model could we use? How could we get creative with it? And so the teachers who have stuck around, they understand that, they get that model. There have been some teachers that it's just not their cup of tea, and that's fine. And that's why we do a 3-month contract. So we try it out for 3 months. If it's not working, you don't love the model, it's just, you know, we can step away from it. No hard feelings at all. But for the most part, it has been like really well received from the teachers.
Yeah. I think one of the things that kind of intrigues me from the business side of things is that I think as a yoga teacher, when you enter into the studio space, unless you have been a studio owner or a studio manager, you don't really understand the back end. Like It sucks as a yoga teacher to show up for your class and to not have anyone come up or turn up, but then you usually have an agreement with the studio owner. Like maybe you get paid half of your normal rate, or maybe you still get paid your full rate. But if you're getting paid $50 a class, nobody shows up, like that's out of the studio owner's pocket. And then it's like, okay, what can we do to like bump this class up? And I like that there's like sort of that self-responsibility aspect that kind of teaches teachers how to be more entrepreneurial. It's like, okay, if nobody's coming, like this is your money on the line and you need to go out there and like talk to your friends and communicate with your people what you're doing and build a following and talk to people about what they're looking for and that sort of thing, which, is probably like harder, especially off the get-go. But I do think that it's like a positive thing from that entrepreneurial standpoint.
Yeah. And, you know, like you're right. Like you, as a studio owner or a manager, it's like, gosh, that was $50 out of the studio's pocket. Or sometimes like the studio owner's pocket just to be able to have somebody show up for class. So I think like all in all, like it's just part of our responsibility as yoga teachers to be able to share this work and not get apathetic about it. Like it's really easy to go to the Y or go to a studio and just be like, I'm here and today we're going to teach about first chakra because that's just what I came up with in the car ride over here. But with this model, like it requires that responsibility of, planning out what is your class going to be, create a Facebook event for it. Maybe you want to do a promotion that's like bring a friend for free this week. Like all of our teachers have the opportunity to do that. And the ones that do are the ones who have created the following, who have good turnout with their numbers. And the ones that don't are the ones that don't necessarily love the model. So it's interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I like that there's lots of different models that exist for different types of teachers and that sort of thing. So I know you also run the Winston Salem Yoga Festival. When did you start that?
Gosh, so 2019 will be our first year for it, which I'm incredibly nervous but super excited about. And I guess like maybe 3 years ago, I had kind of toyed around with the idea, but there were almost like too many cooks in the kitchen, and it was got really just messy. And so it never really came to fruition. And so I just kind of let it land. And I don't think that our city was really ready for it a couple of years ago, but things have shifted now, and I think it'll be a really great tournament. Or I keep saying tournament because I used to run a fishing tournament, and this is not a fishing tournament. This is a yoga festival, but I come from event planning kind of background, and so this is not a fishing tournament. This is a yoga festival.
Yeah, when is the festival happening?
So it will be May 18th of this year.
Awesome. And so I think that, running a yoga festival in, whatever, city or town that you're based in is something that a lot of people are kind of interested in. Like, I think that people know sort of kind of those bigger festivals like Wanderlust, for example. They're like, but, I could serve my community maybe in a different way, or I could serve them because Wanderlust isn't coming here or something like that. But I think it's this thing that people often talk themselves out of. Can you kind of talk about, I know you haven't done the festival yet, but can you talk about like what sort of the back end sort of business side of getting this festival ready to go has been like?
Yeah, it's, I needed a design team. That was part number one, was like, let's get a design team together. So we have a team that is diverse across the different parts of our community. And so one of the missions with this festival was trying to engage all parts of our community. Like yoga is really stationed in like one area. So how could we reach across all of the edges and invite everybody in? So design team was part one, so that I, just as honestly as a skinny white girl that does yoga, like your atypical thing, like how am I like really embracing all parts of our community and not looking like, oh, hey, here comes the skinny white girl that's going to try to bring yoga into all parts of our community. So I needed to put a design team together. So I'm really grateful for our design team and their just ability to bring opinions, to bring a new dynamic to really how this festival is going to turn out. So that was a really, really important piece. The second important piece of this was like, where is the money going? And as you have probably, hopefully figured out a little bit about me, is that I don't like the spotlight on me. And so while this festival does benefit K10 Yoga, it's benefiting K10 Yoga in a way that we're creating sponsors, we're creating scholarships and fellowship opportunities for people to be able to take teacher training that perhaps wouldn't be able to afford it in other methods. So I had to kind of get creative with that too, of what does this look like, so that it's not all about Kristen and all about K10 Yoga, but we're pulling all parts of the community to be involved. So the kind of third piece that went along with that was finding supporting studios. So I invited all the studios in town to be supporting studios of the festival. And everybody that shows up to the festival gets what's called a compass card. And this will allow for any participant to take one class at all of the participating studios. So now we're giving away free classes. We're creating a festival that brings everybody together, and we're doing it from a way that benefits people to be able to step into the role of yoga teacher within their communities if they so choose. So there was some strategy behind it that felt a little convoluted in my head at first, but as I worked with the design team, it really started to unfold really beautifully. And I'm really, really looking forward to how it will actually play out. But we also have sponsorship opportunities, and those sponsorship opportunities, of course, are bringing money in just to cover like the basic cost of the festival. But then every sponsor gets a number of tickets, but then that number of tickets is matched and goes back into the community to be able to distribute tickets basically for free to, again, people who would not be able to afford to come to the festival. So everything just kind of plays on itself as to how we keep giving back. Like those who can afford to do stuff, afford to do it, and then they're giving back in a way that they might not even recognize was an opportunity for them to give back. So
yeah, that's amazing. It sounds like an awesome event that's going to be happening. And I just pulled up the webpage while you were talking. There's a lot of supporting studios. Are all of those in the Winston-Salem area?
They are.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about this community, but it seems like there's a lot of yoga there. So have you got like pretty good support from the studios? Like people are excited about this and on board with it?
Yeah, for sure. And, it's interesting, like if I kind of step back from the yoga side of things and step into the business side of things, it's like, why would you not want to be a part of it? Right? Like this is the Winston-Salem Yoga Festival. So we're calling all the studios in to be a part of it. So from a business perspective, it would be really smart to be involved in whatever capacity you can be involved. So, there was a little like sneaky play, if you will, there. Where I was like, let's get everybody involved. How do we do that?
Yeah, no, that's amazing. Have there been any kind of like major challenges with it or kind of like big sort of business learnings that you've had with the festival so far?
Getting permits from the city, like that has been, I'm not going to call it an issue, but that has been just something to work with. The park where we're going to do the festival is next to a greenway. And so with this particular festival, it's going to be like a 5K run or walk, whatever you want to do. We have a local, I know it's like a national thing, but cycle bar. So cycle bar is going to actually bring their stationary bikes out. So if people don't want to run, then they can cycle. And then it'll be a yoga class, and then it'll be a meditation. And then we'll have a breakout sessions with just conversations between honestly, systematic oppression, and then conversations around being a traveling yoga teacher or just different things to spark your visions for the next year. So there's a whole lot of moving parts happening with the event. And so working with the city, it seems like it's like all I need is just the permit. Like there's so many other working parts going on. Why is getting the permit seem like that's like the harder piece of it? But just working with the city to just get answers to questions. What are the restrooms like? How many are there? How many stalls are there in the men's room? Just like little things that like logistically we need to deal with, but seem like they would be really easy, have tended to be the more difficult things to work with. So, but I chose to do it at this particular park because the greenway is there, and so we can do the run on the greenway without having to shut the streets down. So, in my experience in the past, it can get quite expensive to shut the streets down to run a race. So, the greenway was just a smart way to bring that element into it, but again, I didn't think that it would be so difficult just to get an email response from the city. Mm-hmm. It takes like weeks.
Oh God, that's so frustrating. I feel like it's like, I guess it's those things where you imagine like, okay, we're going to like get the website going and we're going to get the plans for it. And we get the community involved and then we need to like sell the tickets. And I feel like selling the ticket should be like the hardest thing, like the marketing side of it. But I feel like there's always like these little barriers to entry that you don't realize. I had something on like a much similar, or on a much smaller scale, but sort of similar a couple of years ago. I went back home to where I'm from in Canada, and I was like, I'm going to teach yoga in the park. And then somebody's like, oh, no, you can't just teach yoga in the park. And I was like, what do you mean you can't teach yoga in the park? And they're like, well, the park belongs to the city and you have to get a permit. And I wanted to do it with a friend, like in the national park. That's like virtually impossible.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
If you want to like teach yoga in a national park, and you're not a park employee, you like have to have a registered business in the park. And I was like, I'm not like registering a business to teach by donation yoga, like under some trees.
You're like, we're just trying to share the benefits of yoga with the world. Why is this so hard?
I know. I was like, okay, well, scratch that idea then. Just not going to do that.
So. I know. It's just, that's been interesting. And then I got kind of tickled over like the insurance, because it's like, I know that I need additional insurance for the city. Like that's very clear. And then like I had to laugh. One of the emails that they did send back, they're like, we need proof of insurance. And I'm like, I can't get it until I know that I have like the permitting. like there's, I don't know, their timeline of that was just backwards. And then like you can't, with my insurance company, I can't get the insurance for a one-time event until 45 days prior to the event. So I was telling the city, I was like, I can't wait till 45 days before the event for you to give me the permit so that I can prove to you that I have insurance. I'm just going to need for you to trust the fact that I'm going to have insurance. Here's my personal insurance, but I don't know what you want me to do.
Yeah, that's a bit frustrating. It's like when you have to go, I don't know, it's like if your passport expires and then you've got to go like no, that's a bad example. It's like if your wallet gets stolen and you need to go replace your stuff and your bank's like, we need your ID. And you're like, but my ID got stolen. And then you go to like get your ID and they're like, do you have another piece of ID? And you're like, I don't have any ID. Somebody stole it all.
No, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, totally for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. It sounds like it's going to be awesome. And I'm definitely like keen to hear how it goes for you guys. And I hope that it's amazing. I'm curious, you mentioned that like, I know you haven't necessarily blended like yoga and travel together, but you said that you've been working with yoga teachers to kind of teach them more of that side of things. If anyone's listening and they kind of want to be traveling and teaching yoga, what are some of your top tips for kind of getting out there as a traveling yoga teacher?
Yeah, well, so it's so interesting. Last year I was in Cambodia and I met Britta, who runs Xanadu Yoga. Mm-hmm. And so she has like this whole piece of her stuff where she teaches people how to travel the world and teach yoga. And, I kind of figured it out on my own just by hauling off and going to Fiji. So I know lessons more than like strategy as to how to do it. So I've actually really connected with Britta, and we've created this part. It's an extracurricular part of teacher training, actually, where they can add on her program if their idea is to go and travel the world and teach. But honestly, it's just like spin the globe, decide where you want to go, and start doing some research on the area and figure out like what is there, where could you go, where could you teach. But then also just checking in that it's not being exploited. Like, I think that's a thing that's like kind of starting to come up. And that's one thing I really appreciate with Britta is that she knows her places. And, there are some, as much as we'd like to think that the world we live in is rainbows and unicorns, there are some people, some countries, some different places that will say like, yeah, let's bring these people in to teach yoga, but they're creating false conditions of people who need yoga just to serve a different purpose. So like that gets really squirrely. And so I just like to kind of ask for people to do their research about where they're going, who they're getting involved with. And while it seems like super fun and just like, let's go and just travel and teach, like what is the actual impact that we're having on the community? And so again, that's where like Britta's work really comes into play, is that she's really talking about how yoga teachers can have a positive impact on the globe, as opposed to just like, kind of kitschy going in and being like, hey, I'm here to teach you yoga, and it not really being from a place of service. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's kind of similar to like the way that I guess as a traveler, I've kind of thought about like volunteer work as well. Like I think that people who go to volunteer similar the way that like yoga teachers are going to bring yoga to another country. Like I think it always comes, or it generally comes from a place of giving and service and caring. But I think you really do need to understand like what's happening on the other end of things. Like, are you showing up to a volunteer program and paying money to be there and understanding like where the money is actually going? Like, is it going to the children that need it, or is it going to the people who need it? And I think it's the same thing like with the yoga. And obviously that's going to be different depending on what country you're going to. Like, it'll be quite different if you're, you know, an American who's going to teach in, you know, a first world, very developed country in Europe, like Norway or something, versus if you're going to like Cambodia to teach. Yeah, I think it's always important to kind of understand the back end kind of logistics of the business, where the money is going, kind of like who you're helping and like what you're putting your name behind. I think that's the biggest thing. Like when you show up and teach something in somewhere else, like that's like your name, your business, your brand that you're like kind of putting out there. So you want to understand like what it is that you're supporting.
Yeah, exactly. And I always ask like the teachers who are in teacher training with me, I always ask them like, what is your intention? Like, is your intention just to go because you just think it would be cool to go to this country? Then like, right on, like go to the country and just enjoy it. But, you know, just checking in with like, why is it that you want to go? Is it so that you get all of the extra likes on Instagram or whatever that we live in now? Or is it because you do truly want to serve? And just doing some self-inquiry there and just asking the questions of like, what would it be like if this doesn't look like you think it should? And can you still be of service? Are you still willing to go into those spaces and to share yoga in that way? And you know, in my experience with it, it doesn't always look like asana either, you know, so like there are all these other limbs of yoga. And so perhaps it's just like going to some places and just being a listening ear, or just working like with people just to remind them how to breathe. You know, it was in, where was it? India, the Salem Trust is a group that I like to work with, and our teacher training actually gives money back to them, but they've done a lot to like get boys off the streets so they're no longer like selling drugs and living this life that could be so drastically different than what they should be experiencing as a kid. And they've just recently brought in a part of their organization to work bringing girls off the street as well. But where, you know, the new yoga teacher in me a couple of years ago wanted to go in and be like, let's teach all these kids yoga. Like these kids just needed to learn that they could be safe in their own bodies. Mm-hmm. And so like, that's a different type of yoga. So understanding that it's not going to always be like sun salutations on a mat, or let's go on a jungle adventure with the kids yoga. Like really meeting people where they are and really being of service. And, you know, so there's just a little bit of a difference there. And being open to understanding that it might not look exactly how that it might not look exactly how you think it would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think that that's an important thing to consider. And it makes me think about, you know, this is something that I think as yoga teachers in general, we need to be really mindful of in any classes. But I think there's like certain situations where you have to be particularly more mindful. But, you know, remembering that like, you know, if you're in, I feel like Cambodia is a really good example. Like if you're in Cambodia, like Cambodia has had a ton of war. There's a lot of people who are in really, really impoverished situations, uneducated. Like there's some really unfortunate things that, you know, these people might have encountered that, you know, maybe you've had in your life, but for the average, you know, middle class American Canadian, and I feel like I'm making a massive stereotype, which is not my intention, but you know, it's like your life has probably been a lot different. And I think it's always important to remember that like you don't know exactly where somebody's come from. So maybe it's like exactly like you said, going in there and just teaching somebody to feel like it's like safe for them to close their eyes. So yeah.
And, it's really beautiful to kind of bring that like trauma informed perspective into those things. But then I do a lot of work with the social justice aspect of it too. And like, what does it look like to go into like a third world country? And here I am again as like the skinny white person who comes from like America and say like, let me teach you what it's like to be well. And it's like, well, for some people just to be well, their perspective of what that is can be completely different from mine. So just like staying humble in all of that and just recognizing that, I can't kind of prance myself in there and be like, hey, y'all, let's do some yoga today and let me teach you all about wellness. That looks different in different places. And so just to be aware of that and be mindful of it and still go, right? Like lean into it and like mess it up. And we don't learn unless we just lean into it and we just keep trying. But knowing that our hearts are in the right places, that our intentions are well, but they may not land how we think that they will. And, but still just doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I really love that. And I'm curious, you said a couple different things through our conversation, like offering more affordable yoga, more kind of like donation classes, having like a co-op, having a teacher training that gives back. I feel like all of that is like super, super amazing. I'm curious kind of like how you find the balance between being of service, being able to kind of give back, but then also like running a business that, feeds you, provides you rent, like that sort of thing, like striking the balance between making a living, but also like feeling good about that and being able to have sort of like the social justice side of it.
Yeah, it's hard. Bottom line, it's not easy. But in my opinion, it's so incredibly necessary and it's really what drives my work. The last couple of years I've done it I just kind of paid myself here and there, but I also have always it seems like everything that I do is for the sake of my work. And even traveling, honestly, like going and just trying to show people around the world that, this will sound weird and clunky, but like that there are Americans that are, willing to be of service, to listen and aren't just selfish about everything, and are excited to like get to know other people and other cultures. And so it's been kind of a wonky balance, but just the end of 2018, I finally got K10 Yoga set up as a nonprofit. So that required for me to create a salary for myself. So that's what I did. Like, that is the business side of it that I really needed to do. And I'm not saying that everybody should like set their business up as a nonprofit, but to really like set aside what is your salary going to be and making sure that you're meeting that every month. And if you feel as though you have more, then give it back to your business, right? But for me, it was a little messy for a couple of years, just like on the financial side of it. Like I made it work and it was fine, but I've been fortunate in having like pretty big turnouts for teacher training programs and different things. So it all kind of came out even, but I really needed to get my head on straight about, really pinging down, like, what is the budget? Where can I afford to do this? Where can I afford to do this, and this? And especially in 2019, starting to offer scholarships and fellowship opportunities, like managing what those numbers are while also taking care of myself. So, believing and trusting in abundance. And I love, I think it's Marianne Williamson's divine law of compensation, and remembering my value to this work, and that, we have to get paid sometimes. And as much as I want to just put my heart and soul into all of it, like, you're right, there are still bills that have to be paid and things that I need to not neglect. And it's not embarrassing. It's humbling to say that it was 2018 when I finally figured out that I needed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's embarrassing at all. I think a lot of people like go through like, some big stuff with money, and I think that I think, everyone has a different background when it comes to like their money story, how they feel about money. And I think being able to get kind of like clear on that and have sort of like a vision for it and be like, okay, this is how much money I make. This is how much, if there's more, then I get to like put it towards things that are meaningful to me. Like, I think that that's a really powerful way of doing it. Cause I'm sure that there's been times where you're like, well, girls got to eat. So like this money needs to go to me, but like, I also want to like put it towards this other thing that's important. And I feel like that is kind of where you get this like internal sort of conflicting, like, am I doing a good thing? Am I a good person? Versus having just kind of like, this is my salary. Anything above kind of goes back to the business.
Exactly. And I guess it was last year, I had this little Honda, and like, the little Honda was really great, but we actually extended our teacher training program into Tennessee this year. And so I knew I would be having to drive like across the mountains and quite possibly in snow. And I was like, while I like this little Honda, it also feels like a tin can. So, but it was really interesting for me to like trade in that car on just a Jetta, like still nothing like super flashy and fancy, but something that felt a little bit more sturdy. But, I caught myself like not wanting to like be excited about it so much on like social media or something like that. And it's like, now here I am stealing from my own joy of being able to get this new car because I don't want it to appear as though I'm like boasting that I like made all this money. But that's not the case at all. It's like, I'm just excited for the fact that I had the opportunity to upgrade for my own safety as we are transitioning and moving this or expanding this teacher training program to another city. But, it's just interesting how I kept wanting to like justify it. And it's like, why can't I just celebrate the fact that I traded in my Honda for a Jetta?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't think that that's like uncommon. Like, I think that there's a lot of us who kind of, struggle with that. It's like you see this excess that people have. And then especially as a traveler, you see, people who live with like so little. And I think it just kind of evokes this natural, like, oh crap, like I'm a bad person type of thing. When really it's like, there's nothing wrong with upgrading your car.
Yeah.
Like nothing wrong at all. But I think, society kind of tells us like, oh, you're selfish or you're greedy or, maybe you should have done something different with that money, when really it's like that car is now literally the vehicle that allows you to continue to grow and expand your business and to have, more yoga across the country, across the globe, which is creating like bigger waves of goodness.
Right, exactly. It's just funny how you kind of like get caught up in like what are people going to think? And it's like, well, I don't have to justify any of that to anybody actually. Like the grand scheme of all of this is actually a really beautiful thing that's happening. And so like, yeah, I'm going to get myself the Jetta.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. I feel like you deserve that, Jetta.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm curious, throughout your career, like running the yoga co-op, the yoga festival coming up, traveling, teaching, are there any other business lessons that you've learned that we haven't talked about so far?
For a while, I tried to do it all. And it has actually just been this last year that I have reached out to an alumni of my school, and she now helps co-teach a lot of things for me and with me. And that felt weird at first, but it's so nice to have help. And, I've done this by myself since really 2014. And, some days it feels weird to be like, well, what's on my checklist today? It's not like stacked because I have help. And so I guess a lesson or a like piece of advice is that like, don't be afraid to like reach out to ask for help, to like create conditions within your business where like with fellowships, like in teacher training, like I've got help from these fellows, I have help from my co-teacher, and it's just nice to like feel like I can breathe a little bit again and not have like an overwhelming checklist of things to do. So asking for help, getting help, not being afraid to have a colleague and just other like allies in this work that will also help kind of pull you in when you get in like scarcity mode. Like, I'm sure that people out there can relate to that, where it's like, oh crap, if I don't get like 8 people in this teacher training, then how am I going to do this, and this, right? And so just to like have some other people on your side to just say like, take a breath, it'll be okay. And if we don't get the numbers that we want, then we figure it out from there. And it's just really nice to have like allyship in this work, and relationship and community and support outside of competition. So finding that would be that's been a big lesson for me, which is also a lesson in trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think it's hard sometimes to kind of like let people come and help you, especially if it's like your baby, like you've kind of done, like you've grown it, you've done stuff a certain way. Mm-hmm. I definitely like resonate with that quite a bit. But yeah, I think, finding good people to help you with the things that you're doing, again, it's just another vehicle of making that bigger wave, right? Like having a team probably allows you to serve so many more people than just you were able to do before.
Right. And then I'll also say that just like, as much as I wanted to avoid it, like just making sure that the financial side of stuff is stable, or at least that you know what's going on. Like, I lived in a world for a little while where I was like, oh yeah, there's money coming in and there's money going out, and that's all really great. But I just want to turn a blind eye to exactly where it's going and what's happening. But really just staying organized around like just financially what's happening. And sometimes I look at it like I don't love doing it, but it's like my own asana practice of like, I can stay in Warrior 2 for an extra minute, which means, and is code for, I can look at QuickBooks for another 30 minutes because I know that when I get out of it, it's going to feel so much better. Just like looking at all those aspects of the business that you have to run that maybe aren't like your most favorite things to do, relating that back to your yoga practice, and just get through it. You'll be all right.
Yeah. I love that in relation to your yoga practice. I've never thought to kind of be like, it's like the same thing. It's like, I can just hold headstand for 30 more seconds.
Yeah. Exactly.
But yeah, I definitely resonate with that. The first year that I was self-employed, I just like didn't keep track of like any of my income. So maybe the same as you, like there's money in, there's money out. Like I'm eating, I'm not shriveling up. So like I'm good. But then it came to like doing my taxes, and it was such a nightmare.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I was like, I am never doing that again. But I actually find it like so empowering to sit down, like once a month and to kind of look at my financials and to just kind of understand like where the money's coming in, where it's going out, like what areas are, maybe more lucrative or abundant and that sort of thing. So yeah, I feel like as a solopreneur, it's like quite empowering to have that. And then also I feel like that's an area where, like getting an accountant is so awesome if you hate that stuff.
Right. Yes, for sure. And, and it's like, it's funny too. And it's funny how it happened. It was not my intention for it to work out. When people come out of teacher training and then they teach at the co-op, then they're almost forced to learn this like entrepreneur kind of yoga thing really quick. And, in teacher training, we're typically taught, like, here's the business of yoga. You need insurance. Here's like a roundabout pay that you could expect, blah, 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 blah. But like nobody really talks about like the clunky stuff. Like, if you're not good with these things, then just go ahead and get an accountant or like etch out 30 minutes a month to like figure out where your money's going. But we just get so excited as new teachers to just jump in and we want to teach. And we're thinking about like the sustainability, like the actual monetary sustainability on like the other side of it. And so I think it is really important, and I'm grateful that somehow that model from teacher training into co-op like worked out in that way to hopefully teach some new teachers the business side of it in a practical kind of place.
Absolutely. I love that. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing those.
Yeah.
So this has been such an awesome conversation. I feel like we've covered so much ground. We've talked about so many amazing things. So thank you for your time. And I'm curious, where can people go to find out more about you if they want to, become a part of the co-op, maybe do online classes, be a part of teacher training, attend the festival?
Yeah, so K10Yoga.com is the website, and all of the social media stuff is the same. It's all K10 Yoga, but it's like K and then the number 10, 10, yoga. And K10Yoga.com has all of the information there. For the online studio, that one is set under Yoga Evolving. So it's still a pillar of K10 Yoga, but it has a separate website, which would be yogaevolving.com.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you for your time today, Kristen. This has been so fun.
Thank you. I know. I really appreciate you having me on here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that episode of the podcast with Kristen Williams. Make sure you go check out everything that she's up to. And the Winston Salem Yoga Festival is happening on Saturday, May 18th. So it is not too late to join if you're in the Winston-Salem area or if you're in North Carolina and are close enough to get there. It's going to be super awesome with the 5K, the yoga, and the meditation. I am up in Vancouver, British Columbia, finishing up my 300-hour yoga teacher training. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be there this year, but maybe I can get it into the travel plans to be there next year. And, some of you guys and myself can maybe meet up. I feel like that would be a pretty fun MBOM/yoga festival adventure. As always, you can find the show notes on the website at mbomyoga.com. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And you are more than welcome to join the private Facebook community at Yoga Business Badasses. This past week, we talked about money mindset, and I'm loving the open conversation that's coming through about it. I feel very, very passionate about helping yoga teachers build businesses that they love. And that doesn't look like one specific thing to one person. It's different for all of us. And I think that through the support of one another, we can really find, what our dharma is, what we're destined to do, and what's going to really help our businesses grow and thrive. Of course, if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, shoot me an email at info@mbomyoga.com. And since this is a traveling yoga teacher episode, I would be remiss in not talking about the upcoming yoga retreat that Megan Farrell and myself are co-leading in Nusara, Costa Rica in November. It is designed for you yogis. It is for yoga teachers and wellness professionals. It's going to be a week of relaxation, rejuvenation, yoga, meditation, collaboration, community, and we're going to throw a couple of really fun, I promise, business workshops in there. So if you've got anything that you've just been dying to work on or a project that you want to make come to life in a really supportive, warm, fun environment, this might be the time for you. You can head on over to mbomyoga.com/retreats to learn more, or directly to the retreat page, which has a little bit more information, which is bit.ly.com/yoga teacher retreat CR. Of course, just shoot me an email if you have any questions about anything, and I always love hearing from you. All right, that's it for this week, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.